Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. In today's edition, I want to talk a little bit about Flesh Wallone. That's coming up tomorrow on Wednesday. And I want to talk a little bit about Tour of the Alps, the finish there on stage 2. So if you haven't already seen that, then you might want to skip today's edition until you watch Tour of the Alps and then come back here to Beyond the Coverage. But before we get started, I got to bring up Dan Lloyd because he dropped the knucklehead bomb on the GCN Racing News. Now, this was impressive. Dan Lloyd did a great job as the GCN News commentator comes on. He starts describing Amstel Gold about how Tadej Pogačar won it. And then he just gives us a really brief reason that he dropped, of course, Ben Healy and Tom Pidcock and then went on to solo it. And then he dropped the knucklehead bomb right after that. And I was laughing nonstop. It was one of the comments on my channel that pointed it out to me. So thanks, Ian, for doing that so I could go in there and watch the Racing News and catch that. Now, aside from dropping the knucklehead bomb there that Dan Lloyd did, I got to give him the tip of the hat because it was a 30-minute show for the Racing News, and all 30 minutes was done very well from Dan Lloyd, especially when he added Lorena Wiebes, the SD Works sprinter riding at Amstel Gold, when she comes out of the final left turn there to start the Kalberg for the penultimate time with about 20 kilometers to go. When I watched that, originally, the commentators calling it live, they talked about how strong she was and about how impressive the move was. And then Dan Lloyd made a joke about it. And that was the whole thing I was thinking when I was watching it too the first time, was that how can they be thinking this is impressive? Because this is the biggest knucklehead in the women's peloton here. When you think about it, SD Works, who didn't have to do a whole lot of work throughout the early part there at Amstel Gold because everybody else was covering moves and bringing stuff back for them. And then Lorena Wiebes, their sprinter, goes into that final left turn to start the Kalberg, and she's sprinting full gas with nobody on her wheel. I don't know what the plan was here, but it was fantastic to watch Dan Lloyd call it out and basically calling her a knucklehead too at the same time after bringing up the knucklehead comment early there on the GCN Racing News. So a tip of the hat there to Dan Lloyd, who did an exceptional job of describing the whole Amstel Gold men's version, and then he went on to describe all the action and all the small details that was missed live of the women's Amstel Gold too. Big time tip of the hat there to Dan Lloyd. I really enjoyed the Racing News edition of GCN. Now, let's get into Flesh Wallone because, of course, Tadej Pogačar is going to try to go for the 3 sweep here of winning Amstel Gold, Flesh, and LBL. And the next objective is tomorrow's semi-classic here on Muur de Huy that will finish. Now, everyone should be familiar with the Muur de Huy. They're going to climb it 3 times in tomorrow's Flesh Wallone. About a 35-kilometer lap. They'll do 2 times and probably 2.5 if you're counting wherever they're first coming in onto the circuit. So what does Tadej Pogačar have to do correct in order to win Flesh Wallone? Well, this is one of the easiest races tactically because basically you just have to get down all the way into that third time up Muur de Huy for the finishing line there because it's only 166 kilometers. If you can get Tadej Pogačar into the beginning of that climb, most of the work is done for UAE team members. Of course, you still have to go up 16-18% sections on tomorrow's Muur de Huy, but it's only really about a kilometer, 1.2, I would say, hard of a climb. And then, of course, the 900 meters when you come out, when you go into that right turn and then really come out to start the Muur de Huy proper. So 900 meters really hard. Now, what do they have to do? You're coming here with 7 guys for UAE team members. You look at Michael Vink, the New Zealander, and then you look at Vegard Stokkeleggen, and those 2 riders for sure are going to do the early parts and the hard parts there when we're talking about kilometer 0 all the way into, let's hopefully think that they got to get into about 100 kilometers to go on tomorrow's Flesh Wallone. And then all of a sudden you're going to have to see a couple climbers. Now, I would assume they're going to use George Bennett, and I would think Mark Hirschi. Mark Hirschi has won Flesh Wallone back in 2020, so normally you guys might go, hey, he's a winner here. If he had that kind of form from 2020, I would say we're talking about Hirschi. I would say Mark Hirschi would be saved all the way to the beginning of the Muur de Huy, and then he's the one just throwing in a big-time effort coming out of that last right-hand bend, starting 900 meters, and just going full gas with the one Tadej Pogačar on his wheel all the way to 200 meters to go, and then launch the guy. But Mark Hirschi has not had that kind of form. Last year at Tour de Suisse, he looked really solid, then got COVID, started the Tour de France, and has suffered ever since. And this year in 2023, the beginning of the season, the Swiss rider hasn't looked that fantastic. So I'm going to put him into the early parts, connecting from, of course, Michael and Vegard, who do the early work, and then it's going to be Mark Hirschi and George Bennett coming in for UAE team members to start doing the work on the climb that'll start bringing back any early breakaways. Now, the real question is, who do we save for the final part going up the Mur de Huy? Do you save Diego Ulissi, or do you save Felix Großschartner for last guy to help Tadej Pogačar? This is a little bit where you need to have an inside view from the team and understand how all the riders are going. Now, when I looked at this team originally, everybody, all 6 of the 7 are going to go to LBL afterwards. So this is the main team starting Liège-Bastogne-Liège. But Michael Vink, he's going to skip LBL, and then his schedule's a little bit open. When I look at Felix Großschartner after LBL, his schedule's a little bit open too, which means we don't know exactly what his plans are for future races. But when you look at Diego Ulissi, his schedule, LBL followed up, is going to be Giro d'Italia. So you know the Italian rider has his form always going up all the way to start the Giro. So I would save at this moment, without having the inside view from the team, I would save Diego Ulissi for that last rider for UAE team members to be able to start the Mur de Huy and make it really hard and kind of stringing it out there for Tadej Pogačar. Now, if Pogačar has his normal set of legs, there's not a whole lot of competition here that can stay with him up the Mur de Huy. But, of course, we might see something from Bora Hansgrohe. They always have some solid talent in there that could give some good efforts on a climb like this. And then there's always that surprise rider, right? Last year we saw with Dylan Teuns when he came through big time to win here at Flèche Wallonne, but he's not starting because he's been out sick. And so there's always going to be somebody that might step up. And instead of Dylan Teuns, it might be his teammate Michael Woods, the Canadian rider that comes through big. He's had some solid rides here on Flèche Wallonne. And if Tadej Pogačar goes early, if there's any chance that Michael Woods could stay on his wheel, then we might see a fantastic finish from the Canadian rider coming in here at Flèche Wallonne. But Tadej Pogačar, as we all know, he might just go from 900 meters out of that final right turn, light it up all the way up the climb and go solo. And it might be the first time that we see a rider go all the way from the very bottom there in Mur de Huy into the finish and still be able to win at Flèche Wallonne. Remember that year, a couple years back, when it was Primož Roglič that went about 400 meters to go, and Julian Alaphilippe hunted him down like a fish on a reel, just slowly reeling him in, and then came right by him just at the finish to win that year's Flèche Wallonne for Quick-Step. Now we go to Tour of Alps, where we saw Theo Gegenhardt had complained about the finish here at Stage 2, about how unsafe it was. Originally, when I watched it, it looked pretty safe to me. We go in there with 8-9 riders coming into the left bend there with the roundabout. We saw Felix Gall trying to attack going up the right side, and we saw some magnificent riding. If I back the film up just a hair, we see Theo Gegenhardt, who has Pavel Sivakov in front, going into this final left roundabout that's going to start to narrow up this course into the finish. Now we're talking about 400, 300 meters to go when you come out of this roundabout, so it's an important section. Back the film up, like I said, just before the roundabout, Theo Gegenhardt looks right over his shoulder. He sees that he doesn't have any threat really coming up hard from the right side, so he's going to swing left before the left turn. Why is he swinging left? He wants to protect the inside line here, so he swings left and then comes back onto the wheel of Pavel Sivakov. Now we have Theo Gegenhardt coming left, squeezing off the rider Jack Haig, who's getting squeezed by Felix Gall, who came up the right side as they're fighting for the wheel there of the teammate Pavel Sivakov coming in the left. Felix Gall, the AG2R riders, who's having an exceptional beginning to 2023 season as he's flying around the outside. I can't tell what makes him crash. Looks like maybe too much front brake, or possibly there's a knee or handlebar to his handlebars there from Theo Gegenhardt, but Felix Gall will wash out to the right side and get out of the way, and that'll end any chance for Felix Gall, the AG2R rider, to win today's race. Then as we come out of the roundabout there to the left, the road narrows up. Now, as we come downhill, I want to show you the picture of the parking lot that's going to start where this finish is coming into. And if you look at the parking lot where all the vehicles are parked there coming onto the track there, you can see how much of a downhill slope. This is what I missed when I first watched the highlights live. As they're coming down, you can see the steepness of that hill. So what the complaint is from Theo Gegenhardt is this next right turn. As you're coming downhill super fast, that right turn is crazy narrow and it comes quickly after that roundabout. So there's a big acceleration from Theo Gegenhardt, who's done an exceptional job of coming around Pavel Sivakov. And then behind Jack Haig, Bahrain Victorious, follows him closely. But you know there's going to be a lot of stress and a lot of speed coming into this right, which is followed real quick into the left, and then the chicane, and then they're going to come out with about 75 meters to go. But when you watch it, as they're coming out with 75 meters to go, you look at it, the organizers did an exceptional job of barricading off everything. The road looks wide, the road looks smooth, and it's going to flatten out on this part. So originally when I watched it, I was like, I don't know if it was really that bad, until you go back and see the degree of that parking lot there coming down onto the track. That shows you how steep it was coming into that super narrow little chicane that's going to be hard right, left. And that's really what Theo Gegenhardt's complaining about. If you go all the way up to about 400 meters, 300 meters to go with that roundabout, okay, it was a tight turn up there, but not dangerous if you just have one of those. But if that's followed by a fast descent, followed by a real tight, hard, narrow section that's coming off the road onto the track course, that's what he's complaining about. Other than that, the organizers did an exceptional job of making sure the finish here on stage 2 of Tour of the Alps was really safe. And of course, normally you'd think, wow, if they did that good of a job, it looks fantastic. But Theo Gegenhardt definitely does have a little bit of reason to complain about the finish of stage 2 with how technical that section was. You see it as the Ineos rider comes across the line to win back-to-back stages here at Tour of the Alps. And of course, hold on to the race leader's jersey, that when he comes across the line, he pounds his handlebar a little bit, and he's going to take out some anger on some of the officials about the finish of that. Well deserved, I think, and a little bit bad place and bad judgment there from the race officials on how they finished here at stage 2. Not epically bad, but could they do better? For certain they can do better. So when we think about the races coming up here in the future, the race organizers from Tour of the Alps, hopefully they'll do a little bit cleaner job and clean up that stage finish that we saw today. Now, we got some good racing tomorrow on Flèche Wallonne, so make sure you guys like and subscribe as I bring you all the details here. And of course, Dan Lloyd will over at GCN2. If he does as good a job as he did on the racing news there, the coverage that he did, we'll call them guys knuckleheads. I'm going to love every minute of it. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next edition real soon.